Mm.
Is our reading going to come up here on the screen, or should we open it in another window?
I'm not sure.
You should open it in a window for yourself. Yeah.
Okay.
When we read, are we reading the little portion we wrote about our narrators or just the monologue?
Okay, I think I figured out what the issue was, why it was repeating, because I had my YouTube open. So welcome everybody. I'm so glad that you're all here. I really appreciate you joining us. So I'll just give kind of a brief introduction. And I'm going to also record this just so you know, so that I can post it later for our narrators who can't be here. Okay, so I just want to welcome you all to our Spring 2020 public reading for our oral history and community memory class. You know, I have to say I'm really so impressed with the students that we've had this semester, that with the fortitude that you all have shown and your adaptability. From the very first day of the class, you really have like wholeheartedly taken to oral history. And I feel like, I know I've told you this, but if this were to happen to any class, you all are incredibly prepared. And so I have felt confident that you would be okay, and you all completed all of your interviews. So congratulations. So students this semester prepped by studying method and theory, practicing and conducting research. They held 19 interviews with our local residents, 12 for the LGBTQ community project, and 7 for the Monterey County Theater Alliance. So as a service learning class, I want to mention that our work would not be possible without our community partners. I'd like to thank Rainbow Speakers, the Monterey County Theater Alliance, the Monterey Peace and Justice Center, Salinas Valley Pride, for connecting us with narrators. So the class is going to read excerpts from their interviews. So these have been pulled directly from the interviews and lightly edited and turned into monologues. So please enjoy them, and we hope to have a little discussion afterwards. And so just as a note, if you're watching on YouTube and for some reason the feed cuts out, please join us on Zoom, and we will also post a recording of this later, and we'll post a link to that. Okay, so why don't we get started? Are you ready to go, Tina?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay, so Tina interviewed Jocelyn Ampon. So go right ahead.
It was in high school. One of my best friends came out to me when we were 14 or 15. We were on a camping trip at 14, I think. I was growing up Catholic. I was like, oh my God, no. Yes, you're my best friend. I love you. Yes, let's still hang out. Nothing's changed. But then I was very uncomfortable with the whole situation. Like pointing out girls and being like, oh, she's cute, right? And they made me really uncomfortable. But then, you know, it gave me an excuse to look at other girls because she was. I was uncomfortable with it because I was taught that it was wrong. And I think now, thinking back on it, like, oh, I have these moments of recollecting memories. And I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I think I was gay for a very long time. Like, there's definitely something to being born queer, gay, or whatever. It had been suppressed because when I think about it now, I'm like, wow, I definitely had a crush on that woman when I was 8 years old or whatever. I just didn't know that that's what it was. But definitely high school was like the first time I had hand experience with someone who definitely identified as gay, and then allowing myself to experience that, even though nobody knew about it. I wouldn't even write about it in my journals. Like I was too scared that somebody would read it or find out about it. So it was just all in my head. It was making me go crazy. So yeah, I didn't admit it until right out of high school. So at like 19 or so.
Thank you. And then Alyssa Gardella is going to be reading from Angelique Guerrero.
Hi, guys. At the time when I came out, what helped me in a way was because I had other gay people in my life. One of my cousins, her coworkers were gay. You know what I mean? So I could hang out and I'll be like, okay, this is what it is. This is what I hear. This is what I see. So obviously everybody's cool with it. Definitely the very first person I ever told was my cousin Gina. A lot of her friends were gay. So yeah, so when I told her, she was like, yeah, dude, like we know it. You're cool. It is what it is. Dude, like whatever you decide you want to do in your life or love, just make sure that you know that you are with someone that's going to make you happy. That's all that matters. You know what I mean? No one else's opinion should matter, because at the end of the day, you have to make yourself happy and no one else is going to fulfill that but you. So when I turned 14, I was like, okay, because my parents were about to do the whole quinceanera thing, right? They were going to start planning it and all that stuff. And I'm just like, I can't do that. That's messed up. And I'll be lying to them. How am I going to do this whole puffy dress thing? I can't even wear heels. Like, what the hell? I need to come out. This is not right. So I don't think my mom should go up there with me and look dumb when everybody else knows that I'm gay. So you know what? I need to tell her. I remember, I think before she started buying everything, I was like, Mom, I need to talk to you about something. And she was like, okay, tell me. Because she was that type of person where you can tell her anything and she would never judge you. Mom, I think I'm gay. And she's like, what? And I think I'm gay. The way that I look at guys, it's not the way that I look at girls. She was like, well, you don't even know. You're still 15. And I'm just like, Mom, I can't. Are you sure? And I'm like, yes. Okay. And she just stood quiet, right? And I was just like, Mom, are you cool? But I was like, you know what? Just take your time. I walked away and then I called my aunt, which was her sister, because prior to telling my mom, I already told my aunt and my cousin. And they're just like, dude, we already knew that you were gay. You're not telling. Yeah, like we already knew like that. So I just stayed over there at my aunt's house. And then finally we talked about it. She was like, okay, you know, this is okay. She told me, it took me a while and I thank you for giving me that time. Now that I see that you're in a relationship and that you're happy, that's all that matters to me, because at the end of the day, you are my daughter and a mom is going to accept her kids regardless.
Thank you. And then now we'll have Bryant Taylor read from Keith Decker.
I was running track and then it was practice, and then a young lady, a classmate, came to me and she grabbed me by the hand and she said, follow me. I said, where are we going? She said, just follow me. We went to the classroom and it was Shirley Temper's English class. I walked in, I looked around and I said, why am I here? And Shirley stood up and she said, hello, Keith, would you please read this paragraph? It was a script. So I took it and I read a text, and I was about halfway through reading the paragraph when she stood up and slammed her fist on the desk and said, where the hell have you been? I was cast as the father in The Diary of Anne Frank. And subsequently, I worked with some actresses that have done quite well for themselves. Michelle Bueller was one of the daughters in the movie Fiddler on the Roof, and Lane Littlepage went to New York and studied operas. Just the most talented people, and it was my first play. But we were requested to immerse ourselves in that era of the takeover of Germany at the time in the family unit. Some of the best dramas in confined spaces, and you can't be more confined than a family hiding from a threat outside. And not knowing much about theater, I became accustomed to looking at the world through the character's eyes. How did he feel? How did the father feel when he read the ceremonial prayers for the meals and suddenly there's a noise outside? How did he feel about it? I remember opening night, backstage, waiting to crawl into the entranceway, thinking to myself, I have my own time machine. I'm going back in time. And I still retain this belief that if I believe it, the audience believes it. It was Stan Lewinsky who said, the truth, nobody knows good theater, but everybody knows the truth. That's the beginning of my career. I remember walking down the street, walking home, thinking about the lights, fame, fortune, first play. And then historically in Carmel, there are 3 theaters, the Golden Bow Theater, the Studio Dinner Theater. I was encouraged by my friends to
Oh, Bryant, can you hear us?
for instance, Victorian times, they wore paper collars, so they always looked fresh and clean. How to put on a tuxedo and a tie. I was learning from some of the finest people, Betty Falston, Gertrude Chappell, Floss Larson, and Ruth McLaurin, who was a comedian who worked with VC Fields in Los Angeles. I didn't realize at the time that I was in authentic, semi-professional theater. I was learning from the people there, and that began, again, it was a little impetuous to continue doing what I was doing because I was so successfully encouraged, in fact.
Thank you. Okay. So Michael Egan's gonna read from Terry Bloom's interview.
All right. Can I tell you about how I joined the Theater Alliance? Like the story of me joining to support the theater. It represents I think almost all of the theater companies, and it's community theater. So mostly right now we go as far as Salinas. Before I joined, I knew about them. They were doing something called the bars that they would put on Academy Awards for 2 theaters. I became a person who went place to place so I could see how good they were. And then the people that the theaters that did the best, they got awards. That's how I found out about it. And then I ended up being on the board and editing their newsletter because the woman that was doing the newsletter moved away. We're small towns, so we have a lot of other things that I don't know if they have this in other places. They're a lot like reader theaters, that there's various small theater groups. There's another group really great called Listening Place Readers Theater that they do read plays at the Monterey Museum of Modern Art. They're doing La Miranda. Now, it's really fun. Especially, I love every Christmas they do readings of little excerpts from old-fashioned Christmas stories, and the people that are the readers are dressed up. They're wearing traditional costumes of the time, and they get really good actors from all over. At the Western Stage in Salinas, they have something called legacy players, which is older actors from the area, when acting for a long time, get together, and I think they put on a play. We have something here recently, I think they've been here maybe 3 years, called Paraphrase Productions. And they now rented a space on the 3rd floor of American Tin Cannery. They sort of invite young people to come and get training, and then they can be in plays. They'll do various plays, and then they leave. Sometimes they do outdoors. They'll go to different venues. You don't have to go to theater school. You don't have to start at, small children's theaters. So, I think each town has its specialties.
Thank you. Y'all are doing really wonderful so far. So, okay. Giselle Monterosas is going to read from Kylie Hawthorne's interview.
Yeah, hello everyone. All right. I was super confident and loud and outgoing, but I definitely seeking trouble at any time that I could. Doing the opposite of what I was supposed to do always just felt like the most appealing thing. And so, yeah, I spent a lot of time in 7th grade really giving my teachers a hard time. And the minute I felt like, oh, they didn't really like me, then I was like, game on. How can I irritate you even more since you already seem to be irritated? But school came easily to me. I, without even trying, still was able to get good grades. A lot of my friends that were in the same stage of life or doing similar things, I would just scribble a couple answers on a worksheet and turn it in and then get full credit for it, right? So I was able to keep good grades. I had teachers that were like, we see potential in you, but you just can't seem to get it together. So that was kind of 7th grade. And then 2 months into 8th grade, I was repeatedly getting into trouble and was expelled. To this day, that's one of those big memories that I think about. Since we have all this time now during the quarantine, I'm trying to do a lot of personal growth and reflection and self-help stuff. I'm doing programs, and one was asking about, go back to a monster memory that you have. I just remember sitting in front of the board of the district, and they were deciding whether they're gonna expel me. They had my file and they were asking questions, and I couldn't defend myself or explain really what I wanted to. I just kind of shut down, and they were like, blah, blah, blah. So then in high school, in 9th grade, I was still out of my district. I couldn't start high school with my peers, so which was also kind of rough. I had to go to a really small private Christian school, but then I was there for a couple months and the district was like, no, you can't come back. I always feel like it's negative memories, which is frustrating for me because I know I have some awesome parents and life was real privilege, had this great life and all this opportunity, But I didn't want that and I didn't like that. I was almost mad I had, shit on a silver platter. Sorry, can I cuss? I don't know. I just rebelled against that idea in general. I went to the school for a couple months, again, was expelled from there, and was homeschooled for a year. Was able to go back to a public high school in 10th grade, but again, was ditching school whenever I could. Not really doing anything constructive, I guess. Eventually got my GED like a few years later. My entire school system was really not a great thing for me. And the part that blows my mind is that I love learning and I wanted to just absorb everything and ask all these questions. The way that it was set up, it just wasn't a good experience. I guess in the end, I'm like, no one ever cared, no one ever helped me, no one, maybe there were a bunch of people that cared and were trying to help me. I just didn't hear it, you know? I just wasn't ready to take it in at the time. My younger sister is a teacher, and then she did a teaching abroad program in Thailand. It was when I was working in an office and I just did not like my job at all. My family was like, why don't you quit and go with your sister? That would be a super cool experience. I don't know why you are working in a shitty office. Do something else. I went with my sister there, and you're there for 5 months. It was a super cool experience. I just really, really, really liked working with the kids and felt really good about interacting with them. And it's interesting because I always had felt like I wanted to work with or support and help teenagers. I just never ever thought of it in terms of being a teacher. So when I was there, I was like, I kind of like this. Then I started looking into programs. I really didn't sort of have any kind of plan. I'm like, whoa, I could go and get a teaching credential and a master's in education in a 13-month accelerated program. Then I could have like a real job within a year from now. I didn't know what else I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to go back to school. I mean, I definitely don't have one of those, I always wanted to be a teacher type of things at all. It was more like there was practicality in it.
Thank you. Okay, and then Sweet Jane Hammond's going to read from Smitty Smith's interview.
Hello, good afternoon. Okay, so this is regarding Spanish and his education. And so I began to pick up a little bit, and then I majored in it. Turns out I kind of have a knack for languages. After graduation, I went to graduate school at the University of New Mexico. This would be around 1961. I got a job for this company called Teaching Machines Incorporated, and it was program learning. So they hired me without any references. I just went in there and I told them that I had been a Spanish major, and they sat me down to be writing this textbook, a program textbook for Spanish. And so I did that. It was a pretty neat job. It was considered work to go down to the rat lab or the pigeon lab and train pigeons. That was the whole thing. Teaching people is the same as teaching pigeons, as far as rats, as far as some behaviorism. They had a subsidiary that made unicycles. There were about 80 employees. We'd ride unicycles up and down the hall. We'd call the president of everybody went by their first name. So the president of the company was, hey, Lloyd, baby, how's it going? You know, and stuff like that. Very egalitarian in some ways. And so, well, they didn't last that long. We all got laid off. That summer, actually, I got a job teaching Portuguese at the University of Oklahoma to Peace Corps volunteers. They were going into their first project in Brazil. So they were being trained there. So anyhow, to make a long story short, the dean of students at Stanford University thought I would be good with kids. He had a friend that was the director of a middle school portion of a private high school in Menlo Park called Menlo School. He recommended me for the job, and on that basis of that recommendation, I was hired to teach French and Spanish. So I hadn't had very much French. The summer before I started, I audited at Stanford a bunch of French classes, a French lit class, a French phonetics class, an advanced French class. I wasn't trying to get the grade, but I was trying to improve my French so I could teach class. So I taught French and Spanish at this private school, fairly elite, much more elite now compared to then. I was there for 20 odd years. That was a great experience. I'm still close friends with a number of my ex-students. I go back every year and see some of them. And at that school, I ran a scholarship program because it had no blacks whatsoever. Well, I guess they had one black football player. So I talked to my boss, and he said the president of the organization was a racist from the South, but he was retiring. So if I could find black students and other minorities who met the qualifications for admission, that he could get them money. It was informal. In other words, I would contact other schools, who are your top students? And I would give them, invite them to our school. I was pretty proud of that. I started a whole chain of stuff. But being such a small school, everybody knew everybody. I was always called Smitty. I was never Mr. Smith. And the students were from mostly wealthy families. Of course, there were students that were, especially since I started doing, there were students on scholarship. One thing I remember was this kid was from a very interesting family. They lived in East Menlo Park. So I ended up recruiting their son and getting him a full scholarship to our school. And so I used to chain smoke in class. I was a chain smoker. Now, I didn't smoke when I was actually teaching very often, maybe a little bit. Mostly it would be when I would be giving tests. I would stand by the door and smoke a cigarette. Anyhow, this kid, we're in class, I'm smoking in front of the class, and he stands up and he's like, "You can't do that." So I didn't do that. And that was the last time I ever smoked a cigarette in class. And you know, he's right. I shouldn't do that. He was a pretty brave kid. A lot of times when I find out about a student's success, that makes me proud. Yeah, I think when we talk about what your purpose in life is, I don't believe I'm going to heaven. I don't believe I'm going to hell. I believe it just ends. So what is the meaning of life? And the meaning of life is thanking other people. And that's part of being a teacher. That being, I know I have an effect. A couple years ago, one of my formal students, who ended up being recruited for the 49ers, and he's probably now, in his 50s, but he's an ex-49er. And he was from a very rich family. His father was a professional football player. And so his father made sure his son became a great football player. He sent him to Menlo because the father paid the salaries of the assistant coaches. And so he was there for those years. And the 4 years he was in high school, he was also my student in Spanish for several years. He was also my student as a freshman, and he was my student in history. He said that I was the first teacher that showed him he was smart. He said that until he got me as a teacher, I was known as a hard-ass teacher. He got an A- from me, and that he had to work for it. Whereas before, he always got A's. He never had to do anything, and the teachers would just pass him along. And so anyhow, that was a very proud moment for me.
Thank you. And then Jason Little is going to read from Walt DeFaria.
Yeah, first I want to thank the whole DeFaria family for this opportunity. Here we go. I was offered a job at St. Mary's College, where I had graduated from in the development department. So I took a detour, went away from other business to help raise money for the college, and then, while there, met a guy named Lee Mendelson, who ran Lee Mendelson Productions, which is the Charlie Brown Group. In other words, the Charlie Brown animated series were all made by Lee Mendelson. So I joined him, and a few months later, a Charlie Brown Christmas went on TV, and suddenly he was in business. And by misdirection, I was in business. My kids were the voices of the Charlie Brown characters in the beginning. I'm in Burlingame, California, which is where Lee Mendelson's offices are located. And that's where I was working out of all of that time. In fact, he was kind of amazing. He got us major television shows. We never left Burlingame. Had nothing to do with Hollywood. Never was down there. If he were down there, it was to do some recording. For example, one of the shows I did, I produced and directed Travels with Charlie, based on the John Steinbeck book, and Henry Fonda was the host. So the one time we went to Hollywood was for him to narrate it. What I did with that particular show, which is probably the most interesting one I've done, was we got a truck that resembled what Steinbeck had traveled in. I rented a dog out of LA. The photographer and I got in the truck and we drove from Buffalo, New York, back to California, which was the top half of the book, and filming along the way, interviewing along the way to create Travels with Charlie. It was interesting because when the show was over, we all went to New York to show it to Steinbeck, who at the time was pretty elderly and not well, but he was okay. He was able to sit through it. When it was all over, he was in tears because it kind of relived what he had done. And he wanted the dog. I said, no problem. We'll get you the dog. So I returned it by then. I rented it from Riverside, California. It lived with me for about 4 months. At any rate, when I called back, someone had stolen the dog. So it was really very sad. We had to tell Steinbeck, yeah, you're not going to get the dog. But that's a long adventure. That's one in itself. He autographed his book for me, wrote a little message in it, so I keep it hidden so it won't fade. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and then Paul Johnson's going to read from Mark Shilstone Laurent.
How's it going, you guys? It's not a bad story, actually. A friend and I were down at Sequoia High School, which is the nice, beautiful high school there, and we were skateboarding. We were just out of 8th grade. Okay, so this is the summer between 8th grade and freshman year, 64 or something like that. Yeah, we were skateboarding around, and this very fine-looking lady came out, and she was very flirty. She was talking to us. Hey, you guys, I can't even remember the conversation because we were both like, wow, kind of giggling. And so she said, come on, have you guys ever done a play or anything? Come on in, we need men. The play was Brigadoon. And if you know anything about the show, there's a girl, Meg, who's kind of like the town prostitute kind of thing. So the girl that was playing Meg, the director said to her, we need men. Go out there and get some men. We need male bodies for the show. It turned out to be this incredible, very highly respected summer theater thing. We didn't know it till retrospect, but we walked into this just great director of great production staff. But where's that girl? We ended up in the chorus to Brigadoon, and they cast me as Marcellus Washburn. It's a good role. It's a good role because I can sing, and I was always a ham. This Marcellus Washburn, he's got a song and a dance, and he's a second male lead. I was just comfortable as could be, no problem. So that was how it all started. And then high school, I didn't do much till my senior year. And that's when I got back into it. That's when it really started seriously. In high school, I was a little preoccupied with other stuff. Senior year, however, because this was the summer of love, 1967, okay? The summer of love for me, that was the end of my junior year. Summer of love, cliche of cliches, that's where I got stoned and went, oh my God, I have no idea. And I'd always been class president and all that, and did very well in school and was very popular, and I was set to be the president of the school senior year. I was going to run for president. No one was going to run against me. The one time I did drugs and acting at the same time, the only time ever, because I'm terrified. From that day on, I was terrified, but I played Fagin in Oliver. He's the old pickpocket guy who gets the group of kids. So that was the big final production, senior year in May. I'd done one little show that year before and thought, yeah, this is really good. There was going to be a huge party afterwards. And by this time I was pretty seriously tasting the pleasures of the time. So I thought, okay, most of my stuff is in Act 1. Act 2 is some step and then a big finale. I'm going to drop acid right at the beginning of the show because I won't feel anything for the first act. And that's where most of my stuff is. I'm going to drop it. So the show starts to go and it's all starting to happen. At the very last scene, Fagin comes from below. Now on this riser comes Fagin for his final scene all by himself. And he has a solo. And when I stood on that thing to be going up like that to the stage, I was just going, you stupid idiot, look what you've done. You're ripped on acid and you're going to go out there and do this now. It was great. It was hilarious fun. I just did it. And there you talk about like the pitcher pitching a perfect game on acid. Have you ever, Doc Ellis pitched a perfect game and came out later he was on acid? However, I will say, I've never after that I've played a million roles, have I come anywhere near drugs or alcohol within a day of a performance. Yeah, it's too scary. It's too scary of a process. That's the only time where the 60s and all the stuff I did in the 60s in acting came together.
Thanks. And Michael McMurtry is going to read from Emma Bouton's interview.
Hi. Okay, I'll start. It was an interesting journey when my dad died. And when you're a child, children are very, very adaptable. And you don't think you're missing out. I don't think my mom and dad's marriage was particularly happy. So there wasn't an extended period of grieving from my mom. But of course, mom had to support us. So we basically meant as a child, there was a succession of babysitters, some good, some bad, who came around when mom was raising us for a while. Mom had her own dressmaking shop, and we lived above the shop. There was a little apartment above, and we thought it was just great because a dressmaking shop is a playground for children. But looking back, mama had to actually work pretty hard to raise us. And if I have any regrets about my childhood, I think my mom became a little more distant, not through any lack of love. She just was basically, yeah. And job number one was earning a sufficient living to raise me and my brother. So I don't really feel like I lost out that much. I actually had quite a good childhood. Once I got beyond the fact that this yearning really occupied me throughout my whole childhood, into my whole adolescence, and but otherwise had a good childhood. Gosh, I haven't really thought about that shop in a long time. To give you an idea of how long ago it was, I think she bought the shop in 69, probably 68, very soon after father died. And then she sold it in 1971. So you're talking a very long time ago. When I was older with motorcycles, you'd go down to the local bar and tell tall tales about how fast your bike was. And we decided amongst ourselves, amongst a great deal of hubris and bravado, that we could make it to southern Germany and back in a weekend. Of course, the whole bar erupted in laughter and said it can't be done. So we said, yeah, it can be done. And we did it. We did it at night because riding during the daytime would have been far too dangerous. Basically, we got on the freeway and wound up the bikes to up to 120 miles an hour and just held it all the way to the south of England. We got in a ferry, we went across to France, got off the ferry, wound the bikes up even faster, rode all the way to southern Germany, a distance of 1,000 miles. Went partying all weekend, got in a shocking state on Saturday night, woke up with a terrible hangover, and rode back on Monday, and nobody believed that we'd done it. But we had pictures to prove it. It was an amazing journey. It was frightening. I don't think I'd do it right now, but it was a moment in time for me. I don't think you could do it for any now anyway, because traffic is so different. So if a 26-year-old full of bravado had a bike, it was probably far more powerful than mine. They couldn't do that trip now because the traffic wouldn't let them. Besides, none of us are going anywhere right now. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Nikkei Stewart is going to read from Jacqueline Frazier's interview.
Well, one of the things I've done for most of my life is dance, and I started when I was very young. We used to dance in school, and then as I was about 12, I decided to take up ballroom dancing. Now, I should preface, I used to dance on ice when I was 8. My father taught us to ice skate, so we would waltz and foxtrot on ice. Then I decided I wanted to do it on land, and I was about 12 years old. So I went to this dancing school for children, and learned how to waltz and foxtrot and cha-cha. I danced with my husband, ballroom dancing. He took classes. We would go dancing. Dance was always a very big part of my life in later life. So when I was an adult, MPC, Monterey Peninsula College, they were offering tap dancing. I started tap dancing because I'm really Ginger Rogers, and I tapped dance for 30 years until my knees gave out on me. I would perform in concerts at MPC, and at that time when AIDS was first coming into our consciousness, we would do benefits and I would tap dance. So there I was, a dancer and kind of theatrical, and I knew a lot of people in theater just by doing stuff. My tapping teacher, Lucretta Butler, was also a choreographer and a director, and she was putting on a show at King Hall in the Naval Postgraduate School. It was Anything Goes, if I remember rightly, and I was her assistant. She needed help because she was the director and the choreographer. So she would teach me the dances. She would teach the dances to me and to the cast. And then when she was doing other things, I would review the dances with the cast. So I started off by assisting some of the people I knew in theater for their productions. I was working on the show Kim's It with Dale Leffler, who is now deceased, and he was directing. The next show coming up at the Outdoor Forest Theater was Fiddler on the Roof. I just happened to say to the director, "Oh, do you have all of your cast for Fiddler on the Roof?" And she said, "Well, no, I could use some more mamas. They have the mamas and the papas." I said, "I probably could be a mama." And she said, "Well, why don't you come to rehearsals?" And that's how I got from helping on the shows to being in the shows in ensemble and ensemble people. I did a few ensemble shows, Fiddler on the Roof, Oliver. Oh yeah, Inherit the Wind, Cyrano. Oh, and The Wizard of Oz. I didn't ever want to be a star. I wanted to be in the whole group, you know. Some would get a lot of work, and of course, much of that, and they would have dancing in it. That gave me sort of an outlet for what I wanted to do, dance, be on the stage, and sort of get that experience.
Thank you. And then Marilyn Gonzalez is going to read Jane Press's interview.
Hello. So here we go. You know, and one of the things that I have done in this area is I was the lead instructor for the Children's Experimental Theater, which no longer exists, but it was in existence for 50 years under the auspice of Marcia Holvik. And Marcia was, she became very old and she started becoming more and more, you know, unable to keep up with her stuff. So she came in, saw me in a play, and she kind of recruited me to do what she was doing. I ended up being there for 5 years, really formulating my own program, including what she had done and folding into it my own experience. So I taught children under ages 5 to 12. For a couple of those years, it was girls only. My course was called Acting for the Stage, the art of playing the part of playing a human being. And so this day, I have some of my girls who were 11 or 12. They're all married ladies now. So some of them live in other countries, and I still hear from them. It's really a beautiful thing. It really is. In theater, there's a certain way of thinking that acting can't be taught, but being a human being can be the space for allowing people to come into their being, especially nowadays with all the electronics and everything. Kids are completely distracted, or they were when I was teaching there. Their focus was pulled in so many directions in developing these processes for young people to be fully present because it requires authenticity to be on stage. And authenticity means being in touch with what it is to be human. You know, accessing our emotions. I think of my favorite classes had almost all very young boys, very young Hispanic boys. I was teaching at the community partnership for youth, and they were primarily economically disadvantaged. They were little boys of color and all kinds of color, and I worked with them on accessing their emotions, allowing and valuing their emotions, and letting them cry it out. When they would cry, when they would break through, and how wonderful that would be with each other because they were allowed to cry, because culturally they're not. Most of the times boys are discouraged from crying, and crying is important. We talk about the emotions, to use emotions to access the emotions. Most would get up there and would be just angry. And so one of the first things we talked about was the anger is cheap. Anybody can be angry. The world is full of anger, but if you scratch below anger, what is there? What's really going on? That's not easy, which is my feelings are really hurt. I'm disappointed. I'm sad. So we do all these exercises in a safe place. When they get on the stage, it's not showing off. They're there to work, and it's hard work for them to access their emotion. And when they do, it impacts them forever. So it is a very roundabout way of saying that, as far as you know, when I got here 20 years ago, I saw a very healthy, thriving theater scene with lots and lots of creative people and good outlets for kids. I was fortunate enough to have run where I made my contribution to a number of young people. You know, not many of them stayed on the stage. A number of them did, but not a lot of them, but they all were better people for it. And I know I had made my contribution with whatever I had at hand, and that's what's important. Thank you.
Thanks. And Jacqueline Aviles is going to read from Victor Santana's interview.
Well, from what I can tell growing up, from what I witnessed, I always kind of saw it as very toxic in terms of like, my dad hasn't stopped drinking. There was never a part where he wasn't drinking. So that means my mom, of course, had been dealing with that for at least 20 years. There was no sign of change. In fact, he had openly said that he would never stop. And like my dad always kind of like tries to control how my hair is, my haircut or how I dress. I didn't want that sometimes. He was very controlling of my appearance to make sure it was masculine enough. And that was mostly kind of just my dad really trying to put these limitations on me. I never kind of showed any signs of, giving up or letting him do it. So I guess eventually I just kind of gave up. Like he would take me to get a haircut and stuff, and then I would tell him how I wanted it cut. And at one point, he even went up to the lady doing my hair and instructed her on how to do it and stuff, like right in front of me. It was pretty embarrassing. Then this one time he made me wear like these baggy denim like clothes and this hat that I really didn't want to wear, but he was forcing me to wear it. And we would go out in public and I would run into people I know looking like that. It was pretty embarrassing. I would go to Mexico every year, so I was very familiar with the culture in this particular town and stuff. I mean, we would go during the fiestas, which is basically like the rodeo, but smaller, and basically people just go there to drink and of course watch the show or whatever. But this was just kind of, but they're just kind of like sitting there drinking or whatever. It's just kind of very like the norm. For every man to be drinking and stuff, it's really not frowned upon, I guess. So like, I mean, he grew up with that culture. So he believes that it is right or okay. The same way he gave up on me, I kind of gave up on him. And I knew I wasn't going to change his views and it would be too exhausting to try to convince them. So no idea. I would really want to sit down and have a conversation with them about it.
Thank you. And Laurel Guerrero is going to read from Randy Buffon's interview.
Hi, Randy. I hope you're out there watching. So this is a discussion we had and he was talking about his sexual identity. I don't think you need to put a label on it. That's just saying, well, I'm straight, but I have sex with men is kind of weird in my opinion. It's a way to rationalize or not accept who you are, that compartmentalizing yourself. And I did that for a number of years. I think that when I was first married, I really felt like possibly these feelings would just go away. Then if I was married, we raised a family, had a house, that kind of American dream thing. Those feelings, maybe they were just, kind of adolescent kind of yearnings or whatever. They would eventually go away. I think for a period of about 5 or 7 years they did. After my son was born, I felt like they came back and they came back very strong. And that's when I started acting out. I was able to put those kinds of situations kind of in a box in the sense that that wasn't really me. It wasn't really me doing that. It was some other person. And then I would enter back into my, work life and I'd come home for lunch that day as if nothing ever happened. That went on for 25 years and my wife did not know about that. So that was a hard thing to hide and to deal with. I think at the end, when I say the end, before I came out to her, or at least she knew the situation, it really started to eat away at me too. It was just not sustainable. And it's taken time. I remember the first gathering that I went to San Francisco with my HAL, Husbands Out to Wives group. Seeing men hold hands was like such a foreign thing to me, that like in public walking down the street or two men kissing, I was just kind of like blown away, and it was okay. And some of those were with our group, some of them weren't. There was definitely this acceptance of expressing this just friendship and acceptance of who you are. And that really, I think, helped me kind of get to the place I am today, where I do feel proud of who I am. Thank you.
Thanks. Andrea Magana is going to read from Robert Munoz's interview.
Sorry, I was on mute. Okay. So I took out his monologue on a situation he had with Prop 8. Sorry, it keeps moving. Okay. You know, especially with Prop 8, God, that was just, yeah, that's when we're going to get married. And we thought we were going to have a November wedding. As I mentioned, John was a priest now, and he had to get permission from the bishop. Whether you're straight or gay, if you're going to get married, you have to get permission from the bishop. He let them know, and she came back saying she was happy and great and that she would perform our ceremony. That was going to be in November, like before Thanksgiving, the same time that Prop 8 came up. This is crazy. These people are idiots. All this money coming in from the Mormon church. I can't believe the Mormon church was tying up with the Catholic Church, two religions getting together fighting this. I always went home to Fresno for my birthday in October, but when I went home that year and I turned the corner and my brother Rene, who I don't talk to now, we don't talk now, when I saw a yes on Prop 8 sign on his yard, I was livid. I knew it was going to be a bad visit. And so going with my folks on that Saturday to Mass, and for the priest to be up there and his whole sermon had nothing to do with the gospel, nothing to do with readings, was all about voting yes on Prop 8, I was livid. In my head, I was like, you keep church and stay out of this. I can't believe this. I was fit to be tied down and I was so mad. I wanted to get up and scream, but if I did, my folks would just have a heart attack and I would embarrass them and everything. It wasn't until we got out of the church, my mother could tell on my face something was wrong. And she said, Mijo, are you okay? No, mother, I am not. I can't believe that asshole of a priest up there. I was just letting it all out because it's what I said to her. Is up there telling you people to vote yes on 8. If you're not hurting anybody, you're not confronting anyone's rights. Oh, mijo, calm down, calm down. We don't listen to him. I said, bullshit. I know this Catholic church. You guys are just reined in. You do whatever they tell you and that I'm never going to step foot in this church again, mother. I had it. I'm going to go home. I get home and of course, John says, what's wrong? And I told him the whole experience, the sign on my brother's yard and what I experienced at the Mass. He says, calm down, Robert. Are you afraid? You want to get married now? I said, yes. I'm not going to wait until after election day. What I experienced back over there and the way the Catholic Church is going about this, all these people are going to vote because their priest told them to. So he says, well, I need to call the bishop, but with her arrangements, she couldn't. She told us, okay, have a civil marriage, get it done. And later on, when you guys are ready, we'll do a religious ceremony. So we went to City Hall, made the arrangements. It was interesting. Here, I'm doing my best, letting everyone know to vote no on 8. When the Justice of the Peace comes to the house and she inquired about why we're doing this now, I said, because of Prop 8. I said, I think we're losing the battle because as much as I tell everyone to vote no, I have a feeling that a lot of the gay community don't even vote. So they don't realize that they can't protect themselves. I said, we plan November, but we need to do it now.
Okay. Thank you. Anna Lindberg is going to read from Paul Richmond's interview.
Okay, hi. I will tell you one of the most amazing moments in my life was when we got married. Because of the majority of our relationship, it was not legal for, gay couples to get married. And so within the first year, we knew that we wanted to be together for the rest of our lives. He proposed to me and I said yes. But we didn't have the money or anything to do like a ceremony. Like I said, it wasn't legal, so it wouldn't have changed anything. So we'll say like maybe 7 years into the relationship, we heard about this group that was going to organize a bus trip to Washington, D.C. And they wanted 25 LGBT couples who lived in the states where it was not legal for them to get married. Because at this point in time, it was this really strange thing that some states were starting to legalize it and some other states were not. And of course, being in Ohio, it was never going to happen until they were forced to. We were going to ride on this bus to Washington, D.C. and do a group wedding ceremony in front of the U.S. Supreme Court building. Kind of almost like a protest, because that was when the Supreme Court was debating DUMA, the Defense of Marriage Act, which was one of the things that was prohibiting gay couples from getting married. So this was a real hot topic issue at the time. Right when we went there for our wedding, it was what everybody was talking about. So it was assumed, but we did it. I will just never forget being there in front of that building where so many historical things have happened and seeing getting married in the middle of this protest around us who were, unhappy about the fact that we were getting married. but there were also like these other supportive people who were there to, cheer us on. And the coolest thing that happened was originally we were planning to do the wedding ceremony right on the steps of the Supreme Court building. But because there were so many protests and so many things happening because of the marriage equality issue, the organizer of the bus trip got a message from the Supreme Court saying that we were banning anybody from being on the steps. You're not allowed to do any kind of demonstration or anything on the steps. So you're not going to be able to do your wedding. So instead of being on the steps, we did it on the sidewalk, right in front of the steps, basically because it's public area. After the ceremony was over, one of the guards who was standing in front of the door came down. He told us that all of the guards were so moved by watching our ceremony that they had gone inside and talked to whoever they needed to talk to get permission to allow all of us go inside of the Supreme Court building, to walk all the way inside of the building, up the stairs. Then each couple, one at a time, came out from the front door and walked down the steps together, sort of our first, moment as a married couple, while everybody could see us. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Daisy Macias is going to read Rebecca Ortiz's interview.
Hi. I went to private school my whole life, and it was private school through my parents' religion, Seventh-day Adventist. I had never gone to public school. I was really scared. I had heard all these stories, and my parents had me so sheltered that I didn't know what public school was going to be like. And it was really different, like just even the schedules and like how you had to get stuff done, it was so different. But after my initial being scared of going to public school, I really liked it, and I met people that I'm still friends with to this day, so yeah. All through high school, I just dated girls, but I was super in the closet. I think the last relationship I had with the guy was a senior. Then after high school, I was like, okay, well, now I can kind of actually be in a serious relationship. I got into my serious relationship with a girl, which lasted about 2 to 3 years. I was never confused about it, but I think because of how I was raised, I had such a hard time accepting myself. I knew from the time I was in high school up until I came out of the closet to my parents when I was 21. I knew that it was going to change my relationship drastically with my family. I knew that there was a very strong possibility that they would never speak to me again and kick me out and just be done with me. So I think that's why I stayed in the closet for so long, because I was really scared of losing my parents, losing my family. When I came out, it wasn't by choice. I actually was dating Myra, and her parents had kicked her out because she was doing things she was not supposed to. I convinced my parents somehow to let her stay at her house. And so she stayed there. And then my parents realized, wait, this is not a normal friendship. So my mom calls me one time when we went to get breakfast, really upset, and said, hey, I found some pictures. And I think it was pictures of us kissing. So I had to come home, and they basically confronted me. I always tell my wife this because we talk about it. I always tell her that I can't get upset at them because they're not hypocrites. They live their religion the way they're supposed to. They're humbled. They follow what they believe in. So I can't really get upset at them for it because they're not being hypocrites about it. This is truly what they believe. So I can just respect it and learn to not let it affect me. I definitely think that I would change the relationship I was in with Myra and the way that I came out to my parents, because I feel like it could have been done in a better way. Maybe if I had come out in a different way to them, it would have made the transition easier for them. I do think that. But sometimes I look back at it and I say, no matter what or how I would have come out, it just would have been a really bad situation. Regardless of how much pain I went through, I did learn something from that relationship. And it took me exactly to where I'm supposed to be at now. I would say it's better than it was before because now your mom is a little more accepting. Your dad, it's not fully there, but at least it's there. Thank you.
Thank you. And Lisa Davenport is going to read from Matt Friday's interview.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to talk about my interview with Matt Friday. So about 1985 or 1986, Bruce and myself, we had been doing a lot on the Monterey Peninsula. We had a cute 2-bedroom place in Pacific Grove, a bedroom to ourselves, but always one was available. The great thing about that room is we were able to meet everyone. Word got out. a spare bedroom, when you have a lot of friends, know a lot of people, that's not a spare bedroom for long. A place to come stay with us. It was a waypoint for travelers from around the world on their way here and there, stopping to stay with us, and they were from everywhere, Russia and England and all over the US with us. The apartment, my place, our place became known as a desirable place for people to stay. Informally, word gets around, one person tells another, and soon the phone rings and a new friend is on the way. These were not just people, these were people with ideas, smart people who were moving around from anywhere you can think of and stopping to stay with us. Here's the lovely thing, it was a pure form of barter. Never had to ask, what did I need? What could help? It was just done. There is so much energy around us. There were organizers, artists, writers, activists, many great conversations there in the apartment in Pacific Grove. This was a different time and trust was not an issue of if or who to trust. You just knew to trust. Anyhow, they had colorful stories, pasts, some very educated, and somehow it just happened that they would show up and stay. We all had ideas of what we could do for our community. This is after I had been a daycare teacher, set up programs for undeserved kids, and even started a recycling center. That's another story, but I'll get to that one. But our house, again, that apartment became a place to meet others. Like I said, we were hosting such a diverse group of people, counterculture friends who wanted to do things for the community, and I learned so much about the potential we all have to help one another. The one time that stands out to me and that I'm really proud of is the Thanksgiving dinner. It was a Thanksgiving dinner, and I told you I was not a believer in Christianity, but this dinner came together in a wonderful way. People helping people. Now, it just so happens I was able to host a feast at Thanksgiving in our place for 30 people. These people had nowhere else to be, homeless, and some with psychiatric issues. Money for the thing was donated. That's just how things were done. There was a need and the need was met. No questions about bureaucratic or permissions. Just, we need to do something for the community. How can we make it happen?
Thank you. And then Rachel Simi is going to read from Gail Evans' interview.
Nobody but my brother and sister-in-law knew. I had told them a long time ago because they had asked me to be a guardian for my nieces if something happened to them, and they felt they had a right to know and they were fine with it. We had a big family reunion with all of my aunts and uncles and cousins. And one of my cousins had used me as an example to his kids because they were using derogatory terms about gays and lesbians. He said to them, "You know your cousin Gail is a lesbian and you love her, and she's a very good person." Well, they then told my nieces that I was a lesbian, so it came out. Everybody had left the family reunion before it came out. And then my brother and sister-in-law called me and told me that all this had transpired. So that was when I decided I had to tell my parents and tell my aunts and uncles. My dad was actually better than my mom. I was very surprised. My mom said for years that she wished I had never told her. She did finally come around, but my aunts, who I was very, very close to, and all of my cousins sent me letters and said, "We're so glad that you told us. We love you and we welcomed you into the family."
Thank you. And then Christina Matthews is going to read our final monologue from Karen Kusan.
Well, I was 23, 24, somewhere around there, but realized that I had known about that calling when I was as far back as I can remember, all the way back to at least 8 years old. We were Catholics, and as far as I knew, I was going to be a priest. I mean, I couldn't be a nun. Besides, a priest did get to wear a dress occasionally, so the frock that they wore in those days. So that's what I wanted to be and nothing else. And my dad didn't like the idea and insisted my mom take me to go talk to the priest and have the priest talk me out of it in the local parish. He didn't, it just made me want it even more. And that didn't go well with my dad, but my mom loved it. But when the fire came about, and the day I saw myself in that mirror was the day that I began blaming God. How could you possibly let this happen to me? I was going to give my life to you. You were all everything, and you let this happen to me? No, 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 not going to happen. So it wasn't until I was in my mid-20s that I realized I was seeing it wrong. It wasn't God's will that I get burned. It was God's permissive will, in the sense that he allows us to do the things that we choose to do. We have a free will. He doesn't step into the way of that. And my father chose to get drunk and chose to smoke while he was drinking and chose to lie down on the couch and fall asleep. And that's what started the fire. So it was not my fault. It wasn't God's fault. It happened. Wasn't anything I could do about it. But when I got into my 20s, that's when I realized that's not true. There was more to it than what I thought. And when I realized that, my original love for God and decisions and the decision to go into the ministry rekindled even stronger. I was associated with a Lutheran church and wanted to go in there, but discovered how expensive it was going to be. So I decided no, that wasn't going to work.
We help you build financial slack.
A friend of mine invited me to come and play in a band at the Salvation Army. And my reaction to that was, oh, I don't think so. I think I have better things to do than go play in a band with a bunch of winos. I mean, come on, there's got to be better things to do than that. I had no idea what he was talking about. I had no idea what the Salvation Army really was, but he convinced me to try it. So I showed up for a rehearsal, and long story short, I fell in love. The music was incredible, the fellowship, the friendships, everything was just fantastic. Nobody cared about my scars. It was home. It was just coming home. And of course, I decided I wanted to be an officer in the Salvation Army. In my second year in training school, I met Ruth, the woman that I finally did have 36 fantastic years with. I fell in love, and I really did fall in love in training school. Ruth and I got very close. It was amazing to me that I could have such a close relationship with a woman. She was amazing. It took me 17 years into our marriage before I could tell her about me, before I had the courage. I thought I was going to lose her, and I didn't. She accepted it. It was just me, she said, and she fell in love with me. It didn't matter, it just didn't matter. And I just couldn't believe that. It's true, but it's just unbelievable. And my relationship with her over the years just showed me, and so many other things, God was real. There was no question in my mind that he wasn't real.
Thank you. Hearing all these stories together is just such an emotional experience. So thank each of you students for doing all of this excellent work, and for our narrators for being so willing to open up to us. Yeah, I'd like to open it up now to see if there are any questions from anybody who's here. And I have a couple questions to myself just in case.
I have a question.
Yes.
How difficult was it for the students to find the part of the recording to use as a monologue?
What would you all say?
I think that we were all blessed to have such great narrators, the people we were interviewing, that there is the stories you could pull basically from anywhere, and just because it's all human. So it was all, you all were so great. So thank you.
Yeah, I would agree with Jason. I think there were just so many like different life experiences that we got to hear about, and like those are so cool when you get to kind of put yourself in someone else's shoes and hear the details and the memories of them all. And so for me, it was really difficult to pick one specifically because so much of our interview would lead towards just really fun stories that maybe didn't have a whole lot to do with how the question started, but were super, super interesting personal stories that got shared. And I really enjoyed that.
Another thing that I would add is I definitely felt like we made a connection with our narrators throughout the whole semester. So when you choose this dialogue, or this monologue, I feel like you kind of want to like, you know that it's a big responsibility to be your narrator's representative. So like, you don't want to let them down, and you want to like make them proud as somebody that I mean, they stepped forward to interview for this whole project. So I think it was important to just kind of be there for them and keep them in mind during this whole process.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. That was great. Like having the connection with my narrator and then being able to like pick a story for the monologue or a couple of stories put together was really quite an honor, and also a little scary because like I want to represent them well, but it was really cool and really a great time.
I agree too. You know, when I was trying to choose my monologue, to choose the monologue, I just felt like I wanted to choose something that, like, hearing it, I felt like they were very like either passionate about like talking about, or just like that they were like very like, you know, into it. And so there was a lot of stories that my narrator had, and it was difficult to choose like the one, but I felt like this one represented like, you know, his marriage and the impact, and then something like that was in history that affected him. So I just felt like choosing it, like I felt that was, you know, the best. And I'm very grateful that I got the opportunity to interview him and you know, hear all these stories.
Thank you. Yeah, these are you guys like have really great insights into this, and you made some really like deep connections with your interviewees, and that's really obvious in the stories that came out of it that they trusted you enough to share this with you. And Laurel, I saw you had your hand up too.
Yeah, I think everybody pretty much covered it. Just I wanted to make my narrator proud, and he was a little hesitant about coming forward and telling his story, and so I really wanted to make it worth his while, and I chose something that made me emotional as well, and something that I feel like we kind of connected over.
Thank you. And I see that a good number of our interviewees are here. I don't know if any of you feel like, and you don't have to, but if you wanted to talk about how this experience has been for you. And I know us having to do these interviews over Zoom is very different than meeting face to face, but is there anything you'd like to share? Gail?
I'd like to thank Rachel for the wonderful experience of being interviewed by her. We did 2 interviews, and I was very struck by her professionalism and her compassion. And I'd like to thank all of you, and you, Kristen, for taking on this project. As a former professor, I think you all did a wonderful job. It felt like I was back in the classroom again, listening to your presentations, and I loved it. And I think to have to do it over Zoom, and most of the class over Zoom, makes it even more amazing. So I congratulate all of you, and I wish you great success in the rest of your college career. And thank you.
Thank you. Any other additional questions that you might have?
I'd like to share a little bit about the experience. Well, the whole oral history, from going from not knowing anything about really what oral history was, always been interested in interviewing, loved Oprah, but it's a different type of thing, and there's this sort of like there has to be this trust between the narrator and the interviewer, that experience alone was just so moving and so beautiful. And I think if you're open to it, you can learn so much about yourself just by hearing their stories, and also with their vulnerability. My narrator is just like, I can't say enough great things. She's such a wonderful human being, just such a lovely person, and it was really a pleasure and really an honor to take part in this project.
Yeah, I would love just to piggyback on what Christina is saying right now, and that especially during this time of being physically separated from each other, it's been really awesome to make that connection with somebody that we would have never have access to until we were in this class. So being a part of this class has truly been just a real blessing. So, and then as far as the classmates and the culture we all have together before we were separated, it was always a great time together. And we do have a great professor to thank for that. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And I miss each of you so much. Like, it was so hard to have to move online. And I know it's for safety that we had to do this, but I really enjoyed like meeting with you each morning and seeing how engaged you were and how you took to oral history in just such an amazing way. Like, you know, each class is unique, and this class, I have to say, is especially unique. So I hope that you continue to do these oral histories, that you continue this work. And I view you all as professional oral historians. So just thank you so much. And thank you for giving me a sense of purpose, because otherwise I think I'd feel very lost right now too. So, okay, well, maybe we should end before I start bawling. So I just want to thank each of you so much. And please keep in touch with me. Please reach out to me if you ever have questions, you ever need anything. And once we're back in person on campus, I hope you do come and visit me. I know that this could be a very discouraging time, but I know that you will all get through it. So please have faith in yourself and be patient with yourself, and know that eventually this time will pass. Okay. So, okay. Thank you all so much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye. Have a good summer.
Have a good summer.
Thank you so much. You're gonna get the best course review.
Michael, love you.
Bye.
Bye.
Everybody. Take care.
Bye so much.
Bye.
Bye. Again.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye. Yeah.